Hi there, and welcome to another episode of our new video series about some of the treasures and interesting artifacts in the Manchester Historical Museum here at the Trask House in Manchester by the Sea. I'm John Huss. I've been involved with the museum here for close to 40 years, and I really enjoy the opportunity to reach out to all of you today to tell you more about our collection and what went on in the old days here at the Trask House. Today's episode is called Fire, because everything I'm going to talk about has to do with fire and its importance to people living here in the old days. Fire to heat your home, fire to cook your food, fire to help you find your way through the dark of a house without electricity. So let's start with cooking your meals in the old house, the old Trask House. Now, the Trask House, original Trask House was built by Abigail Hooper in 1823. Every room in that house had a fireplace. This fireplace we see here is not part of that original house, but it's large enough for me to tell you about what was going on in the smaller rooms of the original house. So let's start with the fire itself. You'd get your logs, you put them on what are called andirons. You'd light that fire, you'd have your fireplace tools handy. You'd have tongs to move the logs and position them in the fireplace. You'd have a poker, poke them into position. And then if the fire began to die out, you'd reach for what were called bellows, which were squeeze this, and air would come out, and that would help stoke the flames and make the fire come out. And this is a very nice hand-painted bellows that were used here in the house. So once you got your fire going, there were certain things you could cook over the open fire. Perhaps you wanted to make some toast. So here is an old-fashioned toaster. You would put your slices of bread on each side, and you would put that down right there in front of the flames, and you would have nice, fresh toast. Maybe after dinner, you'd want a treat. So how about a good old-fashioned popcorn popper? No microwaves in those days, folks. This is what you use to make your popcorn. And another special treat might be using this, a very handsome brass iron chestnut popper, chestnut cooker. You put chestnuts in there, and again, you'd have roasted chestnuts as a treat. Now, what about cooking the main part of dinner? Cooking your roast and your chicken and your turkey. You couldn't put those over an open flame, but you could cook them using what we call a reflector oven. A tin box like this, open in the back. You position that in front of the fire so that the heat would come in. The flames wouldn't get it, but the heat would cook. And inside was a metal spit in which you had impaled your turkey or your roast. And somebody in the family, normally one of the kids, would sit there all afternoon, turn that little handle till your roast was all nicely cooked. A reflector oven. So that's how important fireplaces were for the cooking in the old days. We're now going to turn our attention to what other uses the fire had in the lives of people who lived in Manchester in those olden times. As I said earlier, the fires were kept going all day long, whether they're cooking or not, because they were heating the house. But they also helped provide heat for other reasons. Now imagine it's a Sunday, and you're going to cross the street to church, and it's bitter cold out, and the church is unheated, and the minister may have a sermon that lasts an hour or two. So before you leave the house, you pick up this little box, little tin box, and you'd come over to the fireplace, and you'd fill that little tin box with hot ashes from the fire. And you'd close that little door, and you'd carry this across the street, hot coals inside, throwing off heat. When you got to church, you put this down below your pew, and you'd put your feet on it while you sat there, and that would keep you warm all throughout the Reverend's 2-hour sermon. At nighttime, before you went upstairs to bed, there's no heat in the house. The bedroom's cold. So you take this. This is a wonderful, wonderful tool. Beautiful brass bed warmer. You would stick this, again, by the fire. You'd fill this compartment up with hot coals, just as you did the little box. You would carry this upstairs till you got to your bedroom, and you'd tuck this under the covers until all the sheets and the blankets had got nice and warm. And then you obviously want to remember to remove it, but when you climbed back into bed, it was all nice and warm and toasty, and it kept you warm throughout the night. So bed warmers, very important part of living in Manchester by the Sea in the old days. Now, when you went upstairs to bed, the house was dark, as I've suggested, because there's no electricity. So before you went to bed, you wanted to have some light. Every house had these. These are a candle mold. These tin items would be filled with wax, and a wick would be put in, and they would harden, and you would remove the candles from the candle mold. And you would stick one of the candles in a holder like this, and you would carry it upstairs. And when you got to the top of the stairs and got into bed, you would then take this little gadget, and you would snip off the top of the wick, and that would put the candle out, and so darkness would settle in, and you could get a good night's sleep. Now, after a while, people discovered that there was another way to provide light instead of just using candles, and they would have kerosene lamps like this. And in the bottom of this bowl would be filled with kerosene, and you would remove that, light the wick, and now you could carry this up, which gave you much better light and much safer light as well. Because there was always a danger of sparks flying and the house catching on fire. Again, every house in Manchester had at least 2 of these, called fire buckets. Hand-decorated leather buckets, usually with the name of the owner on them. They would be put inside a door, and if a fire broke out, you would grab one bucket, which was always filled with sand, and throw that sand on the fire to try to put it out. In the meantime, another family member took the other fire bucket and ran to the backyard where the pump was and filled it up with water to bring back to help douse the fire. Very important, those fire buckets in the old days. And if all else failed, there was always the good old Manchester Volunteer Fire Department coming to your rescue. So that ends today's episode. Stay well, and we'll see you soon.